I think people underestimated just how bad Steve Bruce was. Just how appalling of a manager at the Premier League level he was. I just don't think he's going to work at Tottenham. I just don't think he's going to work long term. I think there's a reason why United didn't want him. And there's a reason why a lot of United fans didn't want him, and that was because of the way he plays football is very, very particular to certain sides. I think... Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Two Footed Tackle podcast. I'm your host, Ari Stamatakos, and we are here again for another episode reviewing all the week's footballing actions. I hope everyone is well. I hope the week has treated everyone kindly. You're going to have to bear with me for this episode because it is currently spring in Australia, or in Melbourne. Well, yeah, in Australia. It's not just in Melbourne. And I have bad hay fever and my sinuses are currently doing their damnedest to piss me off and annoy me as much as possible. So if I do sound a bit nasally and whatever, then you're going to have to bear with me for this episode. My apologies there. But yes, we're back again for the final episode of the pre-World Cup season. Now, this will be, like I said, the final episode of the pre-World Cup season. Granted, the World Cup doesn't start until not this weekend, the weekend after, but next week's episode will be a World Cup preview episode. I probably will touch on some football that happened over that previous weekend. If something big happened, then I'll touch on that, of course. But the main crux of that episode will be a World Cup preview. So we're going to be going through all the groups. And we're going to be giving our predictions to first to fourth, and then obviously 16s, 8 quarters, Final Four, and then obviously the final, Golden Boot, Golden Ball, the whole lot there. Also touching on that, if you want a full breakdown preview of every group, head on over to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel where there will be where I'll be doing a group preview for every single group heading into the World Cup in Qatar. So this comes out Tuesday 6:00. So the first 2 episodes. So Group A and Group B should already be live by the time this one comes out, I think. At least Group A. I'm 90% sure Group B will be out as well. By the time this podcast is released. So go over to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel. Go over to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel for that. Of course, I've got other videos on there as well. You'll see me doing a World Cup, Socceroos World Cup review of the squad that's announced, and it's being announced. It would have already been announced by the time this podcast comes out. It's being announced that Tuesday at 4 p.m, which has blown every single one of my plans out of the water because I assumed that it was going to be, announced on on Sunday, because that's when the cutoff is. So I thought they just waited until the latest possible moment where they can announce their squad to get as much time and thoughts and whatever. But Arnie is doing a presser tomorrow at 4 p.m. So I was gonna give my thoughts and my predictions for the squad, but they would just be so out of date by the time this podcast comes out. So that just was again thrown another one of my plans completely out of the water. But yeah, that's going to be the plan. And I think I've already announced what I'm going to be doing for the World Cup, in terms of for the World Cup, what I'm going to be doing, but I'll be announcing that fully and announcing my plans fully, next episode. But you're going to be seeing a lot of me, put it that way, throughout the World Cup. You're going to be seeing a lot of me. So that's going to be really, really exciting as I yawn because I'm really tired. I apologize. I've been hecked under the cosh with a lot of World Cup content, so I just need to make sure I get my sleeping schedule and my patterns all sorted. But yes, anyway, let's continue, and let's crack on with this episode now. I once again, bear with for this episode. It probably will be slightly shorter than usual. The last couple of episodes have ticked over the 60-minute mark. I doubt this one will tick over an hour's length, purely because there is not really a whole lot to speak about, and I kind of just want to wait, or not wait, but I kind of just want to skip past this episode and get to the World Cup. Before I start, yes, we've also hit 200 subscribers, which is phenomenal. Thank you all very much for that. My aim was to hit 200 by the 20th of November, and we've smashed that by 13 days, which is phenomenal. Thank you all very much for that. That means the world to me. So we can build off from there. Make sure you subscribe to the Two Foot Tackle Podcast YouTube channel. Audio platforms Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you follow with 5-star ratings, all that good stuff. Socials, two Foot Tackle Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Oh no, on TikTok and Instagram, and then 2FTPod on Twitter. Yeah, let's crack on and let's stop my gibberish and let's start. Like I said, it's going to be a slightly short episode today. Maybe not slightly shorter. I'll try and keep it to around 40 minutes because I've got a lot of work to do and I need to kind of just jam pack this episode in as much content in a short amount of time as possible, and then I can move on to the World Cup content, which is going to be great. I can't wait for that. But let's kick things off. I basically want to speak on two clubs who are in very opposite scenarios, and I want to speak on the A-League as well. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to start things off, as you can tell by the title, with Spurs. I just want to touch on them ever so briefly. Of course, their game against Liverpool happened. And I want to touch on Newcastle United, who are in the exact opposite situation to what Spurs are in. And then, of course, we'll touch on the A-League, who went in two-footed. Who actually don't have a person for that one quite yet. And I yawn again, which is shocking. But anyway, I'll think of that on the fly. Let's go. Let's start things off. And let's start with Tottenham. Now, of course, Tottenham have been not in the spotlight, maybe you can't call it that, but they have been slightly ridiculed and been under the cosh in terms of pressure and external media noise over the past couple of weeks. Of course, their tenure under Antonio Conte has hit a little bit of a stumbling block off the back of a pretty good start to the season. They've dropped a couple of games which they shouldn't have, and they've had a pretty poor run of form. And this has, of course, it started, of course, with a 2-0 loss to Manchester United, in which they got absolutely dominated. They went on to lose against Newcastle the following week. They drew to Sporting in the Champions League. They had to come from 2 goals down against Bournemouth to get a result in that game. They scraped through against Marseille in the Champions League, and of course their 2-1 loss to Liverpool. Now, once again, you have to bear with my apologies. With Spurs, it's something that is kind of a little bit of a main talking point. Now, what we're going to see with Spurs and what we've seen so far with Spurs, especially under Antonio Conte, is the antithesis of what Spurs football is. Now, for those who know their history, Spurs are a club that pride themselves on playing good football and pride themselves on attractive, expansive football. That's what they really pride themselves on. And it's something which under Antonio Conte was never going to happen, right? We very, very rarely seen Antonio Conte's side play attractive, expansive football. And what you get instead of that is a very robust, a very subdued style of football that relies on maybe not individual brilliance, but it relies on a lot of things to go right for them to do well. Now what we've seen is an Antonio Conte Spurs side that started towards the back end of last year, or towards the middle end of last year, in a similar way to what we all expected it to. Of course, that new manager bounce is a real thing, and they were playing pretty good football. Not great football, but pretty good football. Of course, they did manage to get Champions League at the end of that season, and they got it in a way which gave promise to a lot of Spurs fans. Now, I obviously made a pretty not outlandish prediction last season, not last season, at the pre-season of this year. Not an outlandish prediction, but I did say if Spurs got Lorenzo Pellegrini, they could challenge for the title. Now, I obviously didn't factor into account the extremely inconsistent Antonio Conte way of playing football. And by inconsistent, I mean sometimes it works and it is shithouse, and it's you scrape 1-0 wins after 1-0 wins, and it just works and you get results. However, other times it just doesn't work. It's very boring and bland and flaccid football. Now, of course, injuries haven't helped them. When you look at their game against Liverpool, they started with Ivan Perisic and Harry Kane up front, with pretty much 7 defenders. Or 8 defenders even. Obviously, you had a midfield of Højbjerg, Basuma, Bentancur, with Sessegnon and Emerson Royale, and then of course the back 3. So you're basically playing with 8 midfielders, with 8 defenders, maybe 70. Bentancur is a little bit more box to box, but It was. I know that obviously hampered them with injuries, and once Kulusevski came on in the second half, they did start to show a little bit more of a spark, and they did start to show a little bit more fight, especially offensively. They had probably they had the better of it in the second half. Obviously Kulusevski comes on, and then within a matter of minutes, he assists that Harry Kane goal, right? So, of course. Of course, injuries haven't helped them. And of course, injuries have played a massive part in why their form has slowly dipped. However, when you look at that game against United, they got passed off the park and they were completely outplayed. Then you look at the game against Bournemouth, they were 2-0 down. They conceded 2 goals to Kiefer Moore. And they were just so out of it. Like, they just showed that they didn't really want to be there. And they were just not there mentally. They weren't in the game. And of course, on the week, on last night or on this morning, Australian time, they went 2-0 down to against Liverpool in the first half. Their first Liverpool goal came from just a lack of man marking in the box, which is a very uncharacteristic like for an Antonio Conte team. And the second goal came from an Eric Dyer mistake, which I think it was Eric Dyer anyway, which is quite not synonymous, but is pretty expected from someone like Eric Dyer, who isn't exactly the most consistent of performers. So you take a look at this recent month, and you've seen that they've lost games and they've drawn games. Of course, obviously that Marseille game they didn't draw. They won it in the last minute. But if you go back and look at that game, if you look at the average positions from that game, it is so just terrible viewing. Spurs are one of if not the least visually pleasing sides in the league. And I made a bold call pre-season that Antonio Conte can lead Spurs to a title challenge. But with the injuries that they've had, and the form slumps of some of the players, I just don't see it. There's a phrase in boxing and in fighting, and that's styles make fights. I think that is an extremely valid term which you can translate to football, in which manager styles suit some clubs, and some clubs the managers just doesn't suit them. I think Spurs, when you look at what they were at their best, and that was on the Poch, they were playing expansive, exciting, high tempo, high energy, high pressing football. And now under Conte, under Mourinho, under Nuno Espirito Santo, it's been bland, boring, counter-attacking football, relying on individual brilliance up front and flooding numbers behind the ball. It just doesn't work. Spurs as a club aren't fit to play a counter-attacking way of playing football. We saw their best seasons, and they made the Champions League final by playing high tempo, on the front foot style football. And yet they've hired 3 managers in a row whose main modus operandi is counter-attacking, get numbers behind the ball, sit deep. It doesn't work. It doesn't work, and we've seen it didn't work under Mourinho, it didn't work under Nuno, and it's not working under Conte. I think you when you look at a manager's tenure, I think you need to not disregard the first couple of months, but that first manager bounce, in a sense, and that new manager bounce is very prominent, because you look at this throughout so many different sporting clubs in the world, right? When a new manager comes in, or when a new coach comes in, all the players are given freedom, all the players are given a platform to express themselves under the new manager, impress the new manager. So you can't really take a whole lot of what Tottenham showed in the back end of last year, because now they've had a full pre-season under Conte. It is a system which we all knew they were going to play, and we all know exactly what it offers, in a sense. It's quite bizarre. It is quite bizarre in the way that they play, because they've got so much talent, especially, like, I know obviously Kulusevski and Richarlison didn't feature over the game against Liverpool, and they have been hampered by injuries. But you have so much attacking talent, of course. Like, you have Kulusevski, Son, Kane, Richarlison. Even when all those players were fit, it was still a very, very similar system to what they're playing now. So it's not as if Tottenham are playing a way of. It's not as if Tottenham are doing exactly what we thought they were going to be doing. Sorry. It's not as if Tottenham are playing it in a way that no one expects them to, and it's completely against what Antonio Conte's system is. They're playing exactly how the way Antonio Conte wanted to play. And a lot of people are kind of surprised by how boring they've been. But if you know Antonio Conte's way of playing football, especially in recent times, it's very, very similar to what he's doing at Spurs. I just don't think he's going to work at Tottenham. I just don't think he's going to work long term. I think there's a reason why United didn't want him. And the reason why a lot of United fans didn't want him, and that was because of the way he plays football, is very, very particular to certain sides. I think the reason why Antonio Conte worked at Chelsea is because Chelsea are a club that has traditionally, I'm not going to say has played boring football, because like Chelsea were, I think, were the first team to score over 100 goals in a season, right? In the Premier League, I think. I'm not saying that, but Chelsea have been synonymous in the past of playing slightly more counter-attacking style football, which translates well to just the way the club is run. It's something that it's very intangible, right? It is very intangible, and in a similar way as to you cannot play like if Antonio Conte went to Liverpool, it would not work because the way Liverpool play as a football club is high energy, high tempo, attacking football. I mean, we saw, not even under Klopp, but under Rodgers, that season where they nearly won the league, they were conceding 4 goals, but they were scoring 5. They were conceding 3, but they were scoring 4. Right? That's the way they were playing. Like Brendan Rodgers managed to get a defensive Martin Skirtle, Daniel Agger, John Flanagan, like Mohamed Sissoko, like he managed to get that defense to within 3 points of the league, right? That's just because of the way that he played football at Liverpool was high tempo, aggressive football. Similarly, Antonio Conte managed to get the likes of Danny Rose and Dele Alli and Eric Dyer to a Champions League final and to challenging the league with 2 years in a row challenging for the league. It's something that is intangible, and it's something that is intrinsically implanted in the club, which you can't change. It's very, very hard to change. And I don't think Antonio Conte is the man to change that. I don't think he is. I don't think he's that type of manager. I said at the back end of last year when I was talking about Spurs and under Conte, I said everything's going to have to go right for them for him to stay. Obviously, he was very vocal even last season about the lack of investment and the way that the club was run to a certain extent. He was very vocal about that last season. So imagine this season when things aren't going well, when a couple of injuries pile up, the lack of investment, obviously use that in heavy quotation marks, comes to the fore a little bit as well because of the injuries. It's gonna be very fascinating to see how Spurs are able to overcome this poor patch of form, because I mean, when we look at obviously the World Cup breaks coming up, so maybe that's the perfect thing for Conte and Spurs, right? But of course, they did qualify for the Champions League knockout rounds by the skin of their teeth, by a 95th minute goal, right? And that obviously will give them the world of confidence, which is something that they need. They've got a League Cup game against Forest midweek, and then they've got Leeds at home. They need to take 6 points. I know, obviously, the cup game's not points, but they need to win both of those games. They need to win both of those games. Not only for, obviously, the 3 points in the league will help, and of course going far in the League Cup is something that Conte will want to do, especially to get Spurs a trophy. But just for the confidence of that group, and just for the confidence of that team, they need to win both games, and they need to win both games well. They cannot afford to just kind of scrape through 1-0, 2-0 wins against those two teams. I have a sneaky suspicion that they will absolutely batter Leeds. And I know I spoke so highly about Leeds last week, and that clip has actually done really well, which I'm proud of, because I was happy with my analysis just quietly. I know I spoke very highly of Leeds last week, and I spoke very highly of them. I obviously had a good win over the weekend against Bournemouth, and I know that Jesse Marsch created something very good there. But Leeds obviously are a team that leaves a lot of space in behind, a lot of space in the channels, and Conte's Spurs are a team that love to exploit space. So I won't be surprised in the slightest if Tottenham absolutely batter Leeds. But I don't think that is a true indication of where both sides are at. I just think, once again, styles make fights. And Spurs' system is just the utter antithesis to the way that Leeds want to play. That's just on a side note. But yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to see how Spurs can rebound from this, because obviously that World Cup break is going to do them a world of good. I think they should be able to kind of rebound from that and be a strong force heading into the new season, heading into the I was going to say new season. It pretty much is a new season after the World Cup. They should be a strong force heading into the January period. If they can get some reinforcements, that should be good for them. Of course, after the World Cup, the likes of Son will be back. The likes of Richarlison should be back after the World Cup. So that's obviously not an issue. Not an issue from their perspective, which is something that they need because, of course, Christian Romero is another player that Spurs have been lacking desperately. They're three players that probably come in and probably start. I'd assume you'd want to start Richarlison over Kulusevski, but I'm not quite sure. I think that's a game-on-game based thing. I think, who else was a player? Who's the other player? Christian Romero starts. He starts for Spurs pretty much every single game. And Son starts, yeah. So pretty much 2 guaranteed starters and 1 60% starter are missing from that team. Two attackers, 1 defender, which is obviously pretty concerning for them and pretty tough to get over. But I don't think that's a valid excuse, because when you look at the way that they've been playing, especially in the game against Marseille, it was fucking abysmal. Like, it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking. That first half was one of the most cowardice ways of playing football I've ever seen. Absolutely cowardice. They literally curled up in a ball and just said, please don't score 4 goals against us. It was shocking. Obviously, they got away with it, and they're through, and that's probably what they need. They probably just needed to win that game by any means necessary, whether it was 10-0, 1-0, 9-0, 100-0, or an own goal in the 95th minute, right? They just needed to win that game by any means necessary, and credit to them, they did win that game, so good on them, right? But I don't think that Conte is the right man, and that's the title of this podcast. I don't think he's the right man for Tottenham. I think it's gonna fade out. The fire's gonna fade out, and they needed to get someone with an attacking emphasis as a manager. It doesn't need to be a big name. They don't need to go out and get a Zidane or I know Poch won't come back. I doubt it, but someone like they don't need to get like the biggest high profile manager. They just need to pick the right manager, and a club of Spurs' size should be able to identify the right manager more often than not, because they should be able to do that, right? So it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky to see where they fall or where they are based after the World Cup. They should get all their players back. Hopefully, the players that do go to the World Cup stay relatively injury free for them. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not Conte can turn this around this season. But I think it's going to be a long when he does get sacked, it's going to be a long time coming. I think, because right now, from what I'm seeing, I can't see him turning it around, and I can't see Spurs and Conte like mixing together to make a good blend. I just think that it's the wrong manager for the wrong club, and it's gonna crash and burn eventually, I think. So yeah, with that saying, let's move on to a team that is in a not completely different, but definitely a substantially different mindset to Tottenham, and that is Newcastle. Now, Newcastle, I've been very high on Newcastle ever since Eddie Howe was appointed. Of course, I did a breakdown last season of the tactical differences between Eddie Howe's Newcastle and Steve Bruce's Newcastle. I was very high on them pre-season. I did say that they would be a Champions League contender, and I was laughed at in the comments of that clip on TikTok, which is, I just look back now and think, oh, how right I was. Of course, it's still very early on in the season, but they do sit inside the top 4. And they do sit inside the top 4 whilst playing very good, very exciting, and very emphatic football. They are 3 points clear of Manchester United in 5th, and a plus 10 goal difference on them. And they're only 8 points. 8 points, yeah. They're only 8 points off top place, which is absolutely insane. They've only lost 4 games this season. They've drawn 2, and some of the games that they've lost have been kind of, sorry, my mistake. I was looking at Tottenham there. They actually sit third with they actually sit third with plus 17 goal difference. Sorry, I should probably just start that. See, this is where recording videos instead of podcasts actually helps me, right? Because then I could just cut that and start again. But I've just made myself look like a fool, and I can't really cut this. Anyway, let's go to Newcastle. Let's actually look at Newcastle instead of Tottenham, instead of me being an idiot, right? So, take 2. Newcastle, right? They sit in third place. They sit in third place. Only only 7 points behind Arsenal in top. They've lost one game all year, and the game they lost was a 98th minute goal against Liverpool away from home. Right? They've won 6 of their last 7. The 4-0 win over Villa, a 4-1 win over Southampton. They smashed Brentford 5-1. They beat Fulham 4-1. And a lot of people were kind of not really sure what to expect from Newcastle pre-season. Like I said, I did a video comparing the Steve Bruce Newcastle to the Eddie Howe Newcastle when Eddie Howe was appointed last season. And like I just said, I did have them finishing top. I didn't have them finishing top 4, but I said they will be a serious Champions League contender for the majority of the season. I was laughed at by a lot of people, and a lot of people said that was a shit take. But when you look at that squad, and when you look at how Eddie Howe is playing with that squad, and what he's instilling in terms of the foundations of that squad, I don't see why they can't be a Champions League contender. I didn't see why they couldn't. They have a very, very solid defense. They have a very industrious and compact midfield with so much talent up front. Obviously, Wilson is one of the best goal scorers in the Premier League, one of the best true goal scorers in the Premier League. Miguel Almiron looks like a completely different player under Eddie Howe. You have Joe Willock and Alisson Maximin, who are just these sparks of talent and pace and agility that can turn a game on its head. And then you have Chris Wood, where if you ever need a goal or if you need someone to lump the ball up, he's one of the best target men in the league. This squad was so well balanced and it's so well drilled that this shouldn't be a shock to many people. They have a fortress at St James's Park, which is incredibly tough to go to. They have a fantastic away record. Of course, their only game they lost this season was a 2-1 loss away at Liverpool, in which they probably should have got at least a point from that game. I don't understand why why everyone's shocked by this. They are a very, very, very good footballing team. A very good footballing team. And I think a lot of people were kind of like, oh, plucky Newcastle, like they can't buy their way to the top, etc., etc. I think people underestimated just how bad Steve Bruce was. Just how appalling of a manager at the Premier League level he was. Because we've seen now, Eddie Howe has turned Joe Linton into one of the best box-to-box midfielders in the league. Miguel Almiron is scoring goals for fun. Callum Wilson is scoring goals for fun. Like that defense is still very, very good. Joe Willock and Alisson Maximin are, like, when they both play, are fantastic talents, like I just said. Steve Bruce was holding this squad back. This squad should never have been in a relegation battle. Never been in a relegation battle. Sorry. I should never. It's way too talented. It has so much talent to be in a relegation battle. And when you have a home crowd and a home fortress like they do at St James's Park, they should win 38 games. They should win at least 70% of their home games, and then bang, that keeps you up straight away. If you win at least 70% of your home games. So I'm shocked at the reaction. This hasn't come to any surprise for me. This is not a surprise in the absolute slightest, because it was obvious to me. It was obvious the talent that they have, and I mean you can go back and look at my preseason predictions. I actually had them finishing. I think I had them finishing 8th. But obviously I did say that they will be a Champions League contender, no doubt, and they definitely had the ability to do that. The one thing I do have maybe not a slight concern over and like a slight maybe question mark is, of course, the lack of depth, the lack of true depth. I think once Callum Wilson gets injured, it's a bit tricky. Once Bruno Guimaraes gets injured, it's a bit tricky. But if they can keep their players fully fit for the majority of the season, mate, I don't see why they can't really push the likes of Tottenham, City, and Arsenal all the way. Obviously, a title is well beyond the realms of possibility. But top 4, top 6 definitely isn't, and top 4 most definitely isn't as well. When you look at they've got Palace in the cup, and they've got Chelsea at home. They've got Chelsea at home in their last game before the World Cup break. They should be looking to win that game. Newcastle will probably go into that game favourites, and I don't blame them. They'll probably win that game. They'll probably beat Chelsea, and they probably should beat Palace in the cup as well. When you like, they were the first team to really challenge Manchester City this season. Like they were the first team to really challenge Man City this season. I mean, when you look at City's form before their game against Newcastle, obviously they lost to Liverpool in the Community Shield, but like let's be honest, that's not really a real game. They smashed West Ham. It was only 2-0, but they dominated. They killed Bournemouth 4-0. And everyone thought, oh, here we go, City are going to absolutely romp through Newcastle. And Newcastle went 3-1 up. They went 3-1 up in that game, and it was a fantastic game of football, and it was end-to-end. Both teams had chances, and both teams probably could have won it. Not many teams do that to City. Not many teams do that to City. And the form has just continued. The form has just continued. There's slightly maybe disappointing performances. They only got a point against Wolves, and that was through a St. Maximin goal in the last minute. The result against Liverpool wasn't great, and obviously they drew to Bournemouth, which is something that they probably shouldn't have happened. But you're gonna have inconsistencies. You're gonna have inconsistencies with a squad that has been perennially coached like an under-7s team, and a squad that has been so dismantled confidence-wise. You're going to have inconsistencies, and at times they're going to revert back to what they know under Steve Bruce, because that is a natural response to pressure, is to go back to what you know. And of course, they obviously will know it will be more intrinsically built in them, the Steve Bruce way of playing football, because they did that for a long time, whereas the Eddie Howe is still relatively fresh. Of course, that's why I think the new signings are very good for them. So they don't even think about the Steve Bruce. They don't even know what Steve Bruce's training regime was like. They can just focus on Eddie Howe's. And I mean, I haven't even spoken about the likes of Alexander Isak, who hasn't really played at all this season due to injury. And when he has played, he's looked phenomenal. I'm one of the very few people in the world who are not shocked by Newcastle's performance this season at all. I've got receipts. You can go back and look at just how highly I rated Newcastle at the start of this season. Everything was there. It was so obvious to me. Everything was there for them to have a fantastic season. And they've been extremely unlucky with injuries, and they're still performing exceptionally well. Eddie Howe is such an underrated manager. He's getting the absolute best out of this team, and I don't see it slowing down in the slightest. They're going to go into that game against Chelsea as the favourites, no doubt. They will be favourites against Chelsea, and they probably should beat Chelsea at home. That is insane to think about. If you told me that this time last year, I would have told you no way. But they have improved tenfold, and you have to hang your hat and you have to tip your hat to Eddie Howe for that, because it's just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. I think that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to maybe not a little bit. I didn't want to do like tactical analysis, because I've already done that. I just wanted to have a little bit of a rant. But yeah, we're just ticking over 32 minutes, so I think it's time to move on. Let's move on to the A-League, and we're going to be touching on. I think like it's been pretty obvious on this podcast, I'm just going to be covering the A-League in its own section every single week, because I feel like I should do that, and it's a fantastic season so far. So I definitely do want to speak about it as much as possible. So let's move on to the A-League, and a high scoring weekend of the A-League, if you can believe it. If you can believe the A-League actually has some good quality. Jesus Christ. It was high scoring, and it started from Friday night with my club, which I definitely do want to speak about, and that was Melbourne Victory. They dismantled the Newcastle Jets 4-0, and it was a game which Victory needed to win. And they needed to win well, and they needed to finally get their attacking talents to show just how good they are. Of course, it was an early penalty from Jake Boomer to get things rolling, and then Victory just did not look back. Nick D'Agostino's goal, I mean, Jake Boomer's assist is fucking unbelievable. Like, Jake Boomer's assist is absolutely world class. Like, it is phenomenal. It was... Oh, mate, it was so good. Like, this is the Victory. This is the way that... This is what we're finally going to see from Victory, I think. Is this free... Maybe not free-flowing, but these touches of individual brilliance from Victory, which will just be phenomenal. Like, absolutely jaw-dropping. Bruno Fornaroli got his goal, despite... Yes, granted it was from a penalty kick, but he did get his goal. And it was good to see Victory fans finally come to embrace him. I know there was a little bit of conjecture whether or not Victory fans will embrace him, of course, being a former Melbourne City player, but he is their player now, and they did warn to him once he scored that penalty, so that was good to see. Moving across to I actually want to go straight to Sunday and touch on Brisbane Roar. Charlie Austin finally scoring some goals. And I know obviously he did score first, and I think maybe this is Brisbane Roar finally scoring some goals. But Austin did obviously get on the end of Brisbane Roar's first goal. A nice, a well-taken finish from the talisman. And then, of course, he did miss the penalty, but it was tapped home by Armiento, which made it 2-0. And then Granted Sydney got one back, but it was a red card by Paolo Retro in the 81st minute, which basically sealed the game, I should say. It was 3-1 by that stage. A slightly controversial red card. I think it was a red. I think it was a pretty blatant red card. I mean, he was denying of a clear goal scoring opportunity. It was high. He wasn't really challenging for the ball. Like he was challenging for the ball, but like it wasn't a realistic attempt in my opinion. So yeah, that is just the thoughts on that. If we're going to move across to Central Coast, Garang Kuol and Jason Cummings. Now, this is going to be posted after the squads are announced. Yeah, and I was going to put this on TikTok, but obviously I'm not because it would be horrendously out of date. If Jason Cummings and Garang Kuol aren't in the squad, I'm going to be showing, like, I cannot fathom a world. I cannot fathom a world in which Jason Cummings and Garang Kuol aren't there. I think Kuol's there. I think you have to take Garang Kuol. I think you have to. He's one of the few players in the country that can change a game like that. We saw what he did on the weekend. We saw what he did on the weekend. Got 2 assists after coming on. The bloke is cracked. Like, he's genuinely cracked. I haven't seen a footballer be this good in such a short amount of time ever in the A-League. He's unbelievable. He's unbelievable. From 8 games last season, he got 4 goals, 1 assist. 4 goals, 1 assist. And then from this year, he's had 3 games, he's had 2 assists. But that doesn't show just how good he's been. He basically, I mean, if we go back to the game against Western United last week, he basically had a hand in all 4 of those goals, pretty much. He has to go. He has to go, and he has to feature in pretty much every game. Shouldn't start. Definitely shouldn't start. But imagine Garang Kuol coming on in the 70th minute, running at a tired Benjamin Pavard, and just ripping him to shreds. It's, oh, mate, if he doesn't go. And then if we look at Cummings, people are like, oh, Cummings or McLaren. Now, of course, this is going to go out after. So I just want this to be on the record right now. These are my thoughts on Monday, the 7th of November at 3:54 p.m., right? Duke is going to go. I don't like Mitchell Duke. I don't think he should go. But Graham Arnold has a fascination with him, so he'll go. Then you have 2 of Taggart, McLaren, Cummings. For me, Cummings has to go. McLaren has scored 7 goals so far this season, but 4 of them have been pens. He scored 3 goals and had no assists from open play this season. 4 goals and no assists from open play this season. Cummings has had 3 goals and 2 assists from open play this season in 1 less game and in a worse team. So let's just get that straight right now. Cummings' output is exceptionally better than Jamie McLaren's. Jamie McLaren relies on a team that dominates the ball and can get the ball to where he wants it quickly. Australia aren't going to be able to do that. Jason Cummings is a far better creator of chances than Jamie McLaren, and in a team where you aren't going to get as many chances as you potentially need, Australia aren't going to create so many chances against France or Denmark. They need Jason Cummings, who can pick up the ball deep and spray some passes, who can take a man on, who can draw a penalty, who has the ability to change games not just by scoring. And I think Adam Taggart has a far better goal-scoring record and has proven it far greater than Jamie McLaren has at international level. So, in my opinion, it should be Duke Taggart, Cummings. I have a sneaky suspicion he's going to go with Duke Taggart and McLaren, and it's going to be the most fucked decision that he's ever made, because You can't leave him. You cannot leave. The reason why I'm so fixated on this is because we've lacked a good striker ever since Cahill retired. It's been Juric who's underperformed. There's been Nabu who played at the World Cup and underperformed. I know he got injured, but still. Duke, who I don't rate. Taggart, who I don't really rate. McLaren, who I don't really rate. Give a fresh guy, Jason Cummings, a chance. He's got the character to say, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to score 3 goals in 3 group stage games and get Australia through to the knockout stages. He just has that confidence and that arrogance about him. McLaren doesn't have that, Taggart doesn't have that, and Duke doesn't have it. He's an X factor. He's a little bit of a bad boy, right? That's what we need. They both of them need to go. Cummings needs to start. He needs to start, I'm convinced. If he goes, he starts. And Qual, well, we all know my opinions on Garang Qual. Let's go to... I want to speak on Melbourne City as well. They obviously won 4-0 against Perth, against a Perth side that are fucking abysmal, let's be honest. So, talking for 40 minutes straight doesn't help my voice. Of course, you have Melbourne City, who just looked phenomenal in that game against Perth. They just look good, don't they? They just look really, really good, don't they? Geordie Bose as a left back is phenomenal. I noticed that throughout the game. He's a very, very good talent. And of course, Jamie McLaren's got on the score sheet, but we all know my opinions, which I just mentioned. And then, of course, I want to speak on Western United. They lost again. They went 3-0 down within the first half an hour against Adelaide United. And Leo Lacroix looks an absolute shadow of his former self. The absence of Alexander Previc has been absolutely massive for them. It kind of shocks me in a sense, because obviously just how good they were last season, but yeah, it's weird. It's a really weird way to see West United, the way that they've fallen off. I think we're starting to see John Aloisi maybe not exposed as a manager, but he was never as good as what he was able to do last season. I think that was a little bit of a flash in the pan. But I guess we'll just have to see if time will tell. Of course, I think the World Cup break will be a friendly arrival for Western United, because they absolutely need it. They need it ASAP, because they just need to reset everything. But I still expect them to have a little bit of a late season charge and really make a push for finals. I think once Previc comes back, once Lacroix gets into a bit of form, I think they should be fine. They've also brought in a couple of good signings as well. They've got that great attacking talent behind Previc once he comes back with Wenzel Hawes and Payne and all these players. So yeah, I think they should be fine. Let's move on to... Let's finish... Actually, I want to speak on the All Access doco, because it was, of course, on Garang Qual this week. And it was done in a way which wasn't... It's very different to the way that it's been done in the past 3 episodes. They actually followed him when he was announced as the signing for Newcastle. Of course, when he was called up to the Socceroos squad for those friendlies against New Zealand. So it was a little bit of like a backstory, and then of course they went to the game against Western United. It was fascinating. Very humble, very timid, very shy, very reserved kid. I'll tell you what's funny. Obviously, if for those who've seen it, like that scene on the beach where he's kicking around with his mates, and I keep forgetting that this bloke is the same age as me. I always think for some reason, I either think he's so much younger or like he's just so much older, but he just speaks the same way that I've seen that like all my mates speak, everyone around my age that I know speaks. Like he's so relatable. He's very, very relatable. And I think that's why the Australian public love him so much, is because he's not something he doesn't pretend to be something he isn't. And he's a very humble, very timid, very just down-to-earth kid. And I so hope he goes to Qatar, because, fuck, that would be unreal. But no, it was good. It was a very good episode, very insightful. I think Nick Montgomery as well came across pretty well in that episode as well. He looks to have set a lot of things down pat as a coach, and like from that perspective, he looks pretty good. So there you go. Let's finish things up with who went into footed. Like I said, slightly short episode today because just wanted to get it over and done with before we crack on to the World Cup coverage. And of course, I've got a lot of work to do across the Inner Sanctum YouTube channels, which you can go check it out or just go to my Twitter at Ari_Y_Stama, and you'll see all the videos there. Or just go to the Inner Sanctum YouTube channel, because that's where I'll be a lot over the next coming weeks. Let's move on to who went into footed, and I'm actually going to stay in Australia and speak about Paramount now. Paramount Plus obviously had some issues with their kind of broadcast. They couldn't actually show some of the games, and thus the games had to be shown live for free on YouTube. Now, as the main broadcaster in this league, absolutely not acceptable, and it's a fucking disgrace. Like I don't want to speak about this too long because it'll get me angry. It's a fucking disgrace, and you should the fact that you can't even get a pause and rewind feature, and the fact that your streams somehow are delayed 30 seconds from my phone notifications is a fucking disgrace. It's a disgrace. It needs to be fixed ASAP, and this World Cup break where there's no football, get it fixed, because you don't have the World Cup license. Thank fuck for that. So just get it fixed. Just change everything. Get a pause rewind feature. It's really not hard. Trust me, it's really not hard. And make sure your streams are up to date, so I don't have to pause, and so I don't have to keep refreshing it every time it buffers for whatever reason. Just disgrace, angry, frustrated. Let's move on. Let's finish things up with the preview of the week. Obviously, there's some midweek fixture. There's a midweek action in the League Cup. Who really gives a fuck? Any big games? Forest Tottenham's actually okay. Oh, City Chelsea. There you go. It's the League Cup. Who really gives a fuck? Any big games in the A-League? No. No, there's not. So, yeah, wait, is it? No, there's not, is there? No, there isn't. Great. Okay, so, yeah, which going to be, doesn't really matter because we're not going to be speaking about it next week anyway. So, yes, thank you all very much for watching another episode of the 2 Foot Tackle podcast. Slight rushed episode, under time, it's gone 20 minutes less than what it probably normally would. But yeah, I just wanted to get this over and done with, so we can crack onto the World Cup coverage. So yeah, next week will be the start of the World Cup coverage. So can't wait for that. It's going to be pumped. I'm so pumped. I'm so excited. It's going to be stressful, but it's going to be so excited. I'm going to be so excited. So, yeah, I'll do the World Cup preview next week. I'll announce what my plans are for the World Cup, so you can catch it there. Make sure you subscribe to the 2 Foot Attacker podcast on YouTube. Thank you very much. We hit 200 subscribers, which means the world to me. Thank you all very much for that. Make sure you follow on all the socials, TikTok and Instagram, 2 Foot Attacker podcast, Twitter, 2FTPod, all the audio platforms, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. Means the world to me if you were to able to just give it a 5-star rating, thumbs it up, or follow it, or whatever. But yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Speak to you guys next week with the start of the World Cup. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching. See you guys next time, and goodbye.